Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation, and delighted to be here and hearing about the future of facilities. My name is Bhakti Devi, and I am here representing the non-profit foundation, Waterjee Altech Foundation. What we are into is basically capacity building of all stakeholders that are. It's about sustainability, advancing sustainability through capacity building of stakeholders who are operating within the built environment, which includes building facilities. We do have a focus on the residential apartments at the moment, but we also do capacity building for most, across all buildings. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and truly, I'm honored and privileged to be part of this think tank. I represent World Trade Center, which is being promoted by Brigade Group. Brigade Group, as you all must be aware of, is one of the leading real estate player. So we have, as a Brigade Group, we have close to 9 million square feet area which has been developed only in the commercial portfolio. And another 12 million is in the pipeline, which will definitely add up. Being World Trade Center, we definitely look forward to have a global facility. And I take care of the operations of Kochi and Bangalore. I'm sure that the session throughout will have a lot of things to take away. And though being one of the panel member out here, I've learned a lot. I'm sure we'll find a way to work out on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Puneet. I am from the Infosys Infrastructure and Green Initiatives team. We are the team that is responsible for design and construction management of all Infosys buildings and campuses across the world.
Thank you.
My name is Shekhar. I represent a company called Sigma Solutions, predominantly involved in the training of HVAC and BMS. We do a little bit of consultancy as well. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see, we got a good variation of people and from across the world as well, because Bhakta has been based in Australia for some time, and obviously we have someone representing the largest building, the tallest building here in Bangalore. We have people from putting infrastructure in a global company that actually is helping people digitalize from consultancy, and it says down here, I shouldn't use it because I can do it, a senior HVAC consultant. So. Moving on. But I'd like to just start off one of the questions, and maybe, Puni, you can answer this one, is just, people have automation systems. How can they benefit from the investment and really digitizing, looking at the infrastructure or the things they have already? What's the best way? What's the most innovative way now that they could look to actually try and utilize what they have with minimal investment, really?
Yeah, sure. So that's a very interesting and a very broad question, so to say. But so from our experience, let's say you want to take the first few steps and you don't want to go, on a full-scale implementation. Obviously, a logical thing to do is to look at low-hanging fruits. And if I had a choice to automate only part of a building operation or a campus operation, and my focus area was energy, I would look at automating chiller plants, because that is one area that consumes most amount of energy in the building. And the second thing that I would do is do a lot of sub-metering in the building. Okay, you'll be surprised to hear that close to 20% of the energy actually gets wasted because people just don't know about it. Okay, and we learned through sub-metering that because at Infosys we have information at not just at the floor level but every wing. For example, if I have a 10-floor building, in every wing on every floor I know how many lights are on, how many fans are running, how many computers are on. There's so much of granular information that a lot of wastage that happens after office hours, a lot of wastage that happens during weekends can be easily avoided. The reason I'm talking about energy metering because it's very cheap in India. It's extremely cheap to do sub-metering, okay? And hence, I'm recommending that because you make a very small investment, but you get very big returns. And chiller plants is the other thing that I would like to.
That's a good point, and I think, when you look at North America, for instance, you'll find that their biggest invention ever in the 20th century was in fact HVAC. And if you look at history going back, that all the previous presidents, you actually have a look, have all come from the South, which couldn't have happened before, because without HVAC, they couldn't have gone through school, it was too hot, and so it makes a big difference. And a chiller is the most mechanical prone failure item, and also probably is the largest capital item, so it certainly warrants the attention. I don't know whether anybody, did you find this in your buildings that, in your buildings you find that the chiller is probably the most problematical when you're looking at your buildings, like a World Trade Center building?
All right. I mean, what Puneet very rightly said is that HVAC is one of the largest consumer of your energy in the premises. Now, the question is how well we are able to proactively control, monitor, and track those energy consumptions. Right. So he has gone ahead a step ahead in having those submeters and localizing the parts based on its usage. I will agree, I will restrict my talk to the World Trade Center. World Trade Center, if you have a look, it is a very high-rise building. It's a compact space. So the impact of HVAC is less felt in comparison to a spread-over area. So wherever you have a spread-over area, I'm sure that the amount of losses what you cater for your chillers would be much more higher in comparison to a compressed area like World Trade Center. But having said that, we still have a greater challenge in restricting, minimizing, and efficiently managing the building in terms of chillers. Definitely, yes. And to one extent, the digitization process has helped us to save in the tune of 5 to 10% of energy, roughly. So that's the data what am I telling you for past 3 years.
Okay. And I guess an open question to anybody here really is that, you know, how much of the data do you think today is being made available to other people to help manage the building? So you've got, you know, helping the tenants, so there are the facilities that are going on. You know, today, do you think much of that data is shared, or it's still kind of held locally on site? Do you think people are using that data properly or not?
Using the data properly. Now, the two gentlemen who have spoken, Puneet and the gentleman from the World Trade Center, they were both talking about chiller efficiency. I would like to emphasize the fact that the data that is coming in is not properly being used, one, and some of the data that has to be used is not being used as well. I'll take about 5 minutes. I'll show you a demo on how this has to be addressed, especially the chillers, because it's an energy guzzler. Can I have the presentation, please, if you don't mind? This is a typical scenario for a hydraulic system connecting the chillers, the pumps, and the zone loads. Here you have all the sensing devices and the measuring devices that helps you calculate the building tonnage. The BMS guys can write a program using the formulas there down below, and they can calculate the tonnage of the building. Now, the conventional way of how it is done is whenever the building is on partial load, for example, this building is on 100% load, all the 5 chillers are loaded, you would observe that the chillers are getting loaded not in a particular sequence, but the BMS is able to find out how many hours each chiller has run. It starts the chiller with the least number of hours run and then stops in the other way around, so that the number of hours shared by each chiller is equal approximately in course of time. So this is how the normal method of sequencing is done, which is not very bad. However, that said, here there is no consideration to the energy consumed by the chillers. Okay? Here is a situation where we are having the load has reduced to 3,000 tons, which means that 4 chillers are operating at 75% of its capacity. Each chiller is 1,000 tons. The BMS, when it recognizes that the building load is 3,000 tons, it decides to knock off 1 chiller, thereby pushing the other 3 chillers to 100% capacity. This is part of the sequencing process the BMS guys write as a part of program. Now, these 3 chillers are operating at 1,000 tons full capacity each. Now, what is not being done is they are not monitoring the energy consumed. Okay? It is a belief that the chiller consumes the least power for every ton delivered at its 100% capacity, which is not necessarily true. What should be done? So in this case, 3 chillers operating at 100% capacity is consuming 1,800 kilowatts at this instant. Okay? Now what should be done? There must be an interaction between the BMS guys and the chiller vendor. The chiller vendor has got a graph like this. It gives you partial load consumption kilowatt per ton under various capacities. So you would observe that those areas are the soft spots of the chiller. This information is not true for all chillers, for all models and all capacities. They differ for model to model and to manufacturer to manufacturer. So it is important that the chiller manufacturer and the BMS guys have to interact with each other to get this data out from the chiller catalog. Okay? They use this data. So instead of 3 chillers running at 100% capacity, for 3,000 tons, they should have actually run 4 chillers at 75% capacity because this is more efficient. The data that is available is not being utilized properly, or the data is not forthcoming from the chiller vendor because somebody did not know what to ask and how to do the programming. This is one gap. Now let's see, how can we improve this further? There is a sentence which says real-time decision making. Let's see how this works. Okay? What we are doing now, this should have happened, not 3 chillers running at 100% capacity. Now we are doing this sub-metering which Puneet was just describing. We are now adding energy meters to the system. Okay? Now when we put the energy meters, we track down the capacity consumed for each ton chiller. Now when we are putting these energy meters, we are tracking down. That's the manufacturer's data that you see here. This is the actual data. So the red line that pops up now gives you the actual kilowatt per ton consumed. Some of the chillers are running close enough based on the manufacturer's data. But one chiller in particular, okay, one chiller in particular is a rogue chiller which is not operating as per design. When this is observed by the BMS now should take a real-time decision to stop this chiller, raise an alarm and saying that there is something wrong with the chiller. The maintenance department has to intervene, set this chiller right, and then put it back to operation. This is a real-time decision the BMS must take. So the gap between the two agencies here, the BMS and the chiller manufacturer, this has to be filled up. Only then you get the energy efficiency that the BMS is supposed to give. This is one example. Another 2 minutes and then I'll be done with the other example. There is the other gap. This is real-time decision making by the BMS. This has to be done. So the intelligence, for this, the second point comes into picture, knowledge gap. Knowledge gap is a big issue. The BMS programmers are normally doing a program based on some information they get. They lack the domain knowledge, which in the morning, I think it was Roger who said this, domain knowledge. They don't have the domain knowledge. They don't have the HVAC knowledge. Here is a case where the facility management team is maintaining a building. The rooms are all air conditioned. In fact, there is excessive capacity. An air handling unit is delivering to a couple of rooms here. And you will observe that there are some rooms which are overcooled. That means there is no lack of capacity in this air conditioning machine. They decide to give individual room temperature control. When it comes to individual room temperature control, the obvious choice is variable air volume units. Okay? So somebody calls from the facility management company, they call the BMS guy, the sales guy in the BMS just quotes for these VAVs without looking at what is inside the mechanical side of the building. He doesn't look at the mechanical side of the building. This is a forward curved fan, which has got a limited pressure capability. It is able to deliver air up to the last outlet. And when this project comes for retrofitting with VAVs, the BMS guy has sold the VAVs, the facility team has installed, or let us for the time being assume that the facility team has engaged a consultant to do this job for them. The consultant looks at the system, okay, and then decides that the last unit, which is the target unit, the last 1,800 CFM VAV unit, which is the target unit, that has to be catered for. The pressure enhancement for the fan is about 1 inch static pressure, which is about 250 pascals, and then this fan is given extra energy. The fan is changed from a forward curved fan to a backward curved fan, which is the right thing to do. Okay? But the consultant, unfortunately, has missed out checking the other VAVs upstream of this VAV. Now what happens here is the one ahead of this last VAV is the one that requires more pressure. That means the fan, which is now redesigned, is unable to deliver air to all the outlets. It is because the one VAV which is before the last outlet is taking away the power consumption. Now, what happens? There was excessive cooling initially. After installing the VAVs, we have some rooms which are starved of air for requirement of air. So immediately the facility team and the consultant team decides to blacklist the VAV manufacturer or the control supplier. The control supplier throughout his lifetime cannot prove that the fan is a backward curved fan which has got lower pressure capability. Pressure is a mechanical unit. The controls guys do not know. They know microfarads and coulombs and those units. They do not know pressure or pascals or bar. The only bar that they know is after 7 o'clock in the evening, with due respects to them. Yeah? So this is a situation which is perennial. The BMS gets all the flack for lack of communication and for their own knowledge gap. So this has to be filled. These are two issues which I would like to emphasize that has to be filled up for energy optimization and for efficient working of the BMS. Thanks, gentlemen. Sorry. Sorry I took a time, but I had to convey this.
So there you are, attend a FutureProof event and you get free consultancy, so don't miss out on the next one, okay? Okay, I think it is an important factor that the BMS wouldn't have survived if it didn't exist today, and it's a tool, it's not the answer. You've got to have that domain knowledge behind it that obviously Seko has just actually pointed out. Maybe back to, I can move on to a point which comes from that which is automation and sustainability. How do we get stakeholders involved in this and really get make a habit of them being involved in the sustainability part of the automation?
So the sustainability issue has two aspects. One is, of course, you can look at the hardware part, the designing and the optimization of the hardware, how it operates. But also another important part which we as a non-profit foundation focus on is the people element. And that people element could range from behavior of people within the building, how they use water and energy. It also includes the capacity for the facility managers or the decision makers, like the example he just gave, to really understand how all these different factors are interlinked. And unless that capacity is built within people, within the, that becomes the key stakeholders, the facility engineers, the facility managers, and the occupants. And so the idea is to create those soft programs apart from, and the automation could help as well. So you could use the information that you can get from automation and create some small modules for the facility engineers to really understand how a chiller works. How does the different elements of the BMS and other factors actually provide the energy efficiency, because ultimately you want to measure the performance on two aspects, on how you're getting the cooling and at what cost. At what cost of the energy. And unless both of them are handled, sometimes you only focus on the functional, but not on the resource use. And that has to start happening. You have to combine the performance evaluation of competence of the managers and the engineers based on how well they give the service and at what cost to the resource. And when you start interlinking, then you start identifying those programs which need to be introduced within, for example, even simple thing like a regular audit, energy audit, a regular water audit will start to reveal a lot of things. And yes, things like submetering, automated meters are available now, which can easily give you some of that information as well. And then you link it with some of the behavior patterns, and it starts to tell you a lot more, which actually can contribute to a lot of more on the sustainability side.
I think one of the things that's always been mentioned about building automation systems is they're boring. Unlike people, you get, can you switch the light off on the way out of the room? Well, they'll remember it for a couple of weeks. But the building automation system is going to do it every day, but you've got to actually understand when to turn the light off. And so it's that once you put that initial effort in, it will happen. I don't know, do you guys have any other?
I'll just add up one thing, what Mr. Shekhar has very rightly pointed out. There are a lot of data being floating around, though we called it is a structured data flow, but it is managed by unstructured people. That's precisely is the case. And two more points on the sustainability as you speak. What happens unless what benefit you are going to reap out of this entire technology or automation process, unless it is understood by those facility managers, you will really not have that trust or the impact to drive through. So that is one part where people need to understand. Second, or the third point rather, is the agility in the system to give information what you need it. Because as on date, the automation process is basically meant to make the job simpler, right? So when you say simpler, that means any query you throw to the system should be able to give you certain, maybe in an unstructured format, at least some data which can go through a further analytic process. So if that kind of engagement is there, I'm sure the sustainability will come through.
Okay. Maybe I'm going to open up this one a little bit to everybody on the stage here without picking on anyone, but a lot of discussion I had over the lunch period was how do we, bearing in mind we talked about the facility management company only perhaps having a contract for a short period, how do we engage the facilities people within the organizations getting involved earlier in the choice of buildings, because they will make a difference. And we use places like Mumbai, I think, as a lady down across the way there was actually talking about lovely glass buildings, but who likes working in them because it's 200 degrees in there, it's uncomfortable and it's not right. Whereas if you were able to choose your building or the space or the layout, you could actually do. How do we get the facilities people within the organizations involved in selection and choice and the running of buildings earlier? I mean, anybody want to have a shot at that one?
Okay, again, a very interesting and a tough question, looking at the realities of the game today. Okay, but there is a cultural thing to it, and there is also a technology thing to it. And I think in our case, the cultural aspect followed the technology. And let me explain. And where automation played a very important role. So, when we talk to facilities team, when we talk to the maintenance staff, it is not that they don't want to maintain buildings right. They are very keen, very excited. They want to make sure that everything is running, spick and span. But unfortunately, for decades, there was no information available for them to verify whether everything is working right. At the same time, when they go and fix a problem, there was no information available for them to verify whether the problem is fixed. Unless, let us say, some of us make a complaint in this room that there is no proper cooling, and somebody comes and fixes the problem. And unless you go back and tell the person that, no, you've done the job right, he or she doesn't know. So this lack of information, we believe, was a major challenge, and that's where automation, came in as a solution. So, we have been automating our buildings for more than, 9-10 years now, since 2010. And we saw a very interesting cultural change at Infosys that the moment we started adding sensors, automating things, putting information in front of people to see in real time, people were proactively looking at it. They were willing to go and address a problem even before it became a problem. Not only that, once a problem was fixed, they could go and see on the sensor, they could look at, a pH value of water, or flow rate, or temperature, or humidity, or air quality, or CO2 level, or air pressure, or water pressure. All the critical information that they need to run the building right was always available. So technologies actually helped change culture. Our operations have completely transformed, and in a very nice way. People, in fact, today when you make a call, they don't rush to the site. They first log into the system and see what exactly is the problem and try to figure out what's probably gone wrong. So technology helped change the culture. And because what also happened is that Now the people who are operating and maintaining the facilities have much more information, because there is automation than before. So they have a lot of knowledge on what works on ground. Okay, so now their perspective is much more valued than what it was before in the design stage. So it made so much sense for us to involve people who know the building so very well when we are designing the next one or buying the next one, that it would be probably foolish to not do so. So we would like to believe that technology changed the culture, and eventually, we are able to operate in a more integrated fashion. And I'm actually going to talk about in my presentation as well. So that's our take, Infosys' take on it.
That's a good answer, thank you. And I think it's a useful lead-in to another question I have, is that really the kind of systems that are available today, that can offer obviously all the asset performance, sustainability that we talked about, and all the other aspects. I think the need for really an enterprise level solution is there. How do we optimize that and get people engaged with having more enterprise solutions that will bring together all the facilities? No one company can do it. There are things you can do once you've got some sort of enterprise solution. We talked about collaboration earlier today. How do we get organizations to perhaps adopt more of these kind of enterprise solutions to actually help themselves manage buildings? Maybe it's something you could talk about in your own experience with your building. Do you find it the rest of the management team in your organization are happy to invest in something like an enterprise solution to help you offer better services?
I will have both positive and negative side.
Okay.
I'll go
out of interest.
First the good thing first. All right. So let me go a little back and what we spoke a little bit earlier. Brigade is one of the real estate player in this market. What changes we have seen past 2 years, I would say. I will not go really too deep into this. Earlier, though we had a lot of data thrown into us, there was no analysis which used to go on post capturing those data. Brigade, as a real estate player, I can assure you at this juncture or make a quick reference is that earlier there was an absolute disconnect between the project team and the operation team, because project completes the concrete structure, hand it over to the facility operation team, thereafter the operation goes on. And now what Brigade has done as an evolving process is to take input from the operation team about that particular building. And operation team is able to give some valuable data for them to incorporate at the project stage itself. That means the constraints, the challenges, what an operation team faces. For example, I'll give, and I don't know how many of you will really agree with me on this context. Earlier, on a rough design stage, Mr. Shekhar will be able to really validate what am I saying. Earlier, we used to take roughly 350 square feet per tier as a design stage. But what we have seen though, and plus the diversity of 20%, plus the future provision what you keep for your infrastructure in place while developing the concrete structure. Now, after analyzing a lot of data past 2 years, we came to know, okay, no, 350 is at a highest level. It is at a very comfort zone, in fact. So now that kind of inputs does help the project team to really seek if what the asset should be invested into. So it has cut down cost to a substantial level. All right, that is one side of it. Next, we have automation process. Of course, we collect data, and this data keeps flowing, whether it goes noticed or unnoticed. That is the other side of what am I saying the enterprises. Now, because everybody is operating in silo, there is no connectivity. What I will really appreciate what Ms. Sakhi has told during her presentation. connecting the building itself is going to be one of the greater challenge. I do not know for how long it is going to last before getting disrupted with some other applications, correct? But as a facility operation, you have a massively heterogeneous range, right? So everything, unless it is connected and the right input comes to the facility manager, he really cannot take a decision other than the quick fixing the problem. So that is the both side of technology. We have been benefited. At the same time, yes, there is a lot of miles to go before we really conclude that automation helps. Thank you.
From an enterprise solution perspective, what Saki said this afternoon is extremely important. Systems have to be with open protocol that promotes the theme of today, which is future-proof. And the next thing is what Infosys does on a regular basis. They benchmark each building, and that benchmarking is passed on to the next building so that they want to improve on the benchmark. This keeps on increasing. An enterprise solution makes a good comparison between an existing building and the one that is being installed now, so that the targets are improving all the time. And rightly said, this 350 square feet has now gone to 450, has gone to 700 square feet per ton. So things are changing, and enterprise solutions, gathering data to provide an enterprise solution will really help, and that will become future-proof. Open protocols is a must.
I just want to make a point. Yes, I just wanted to make a point about residential apartments, which are really, I feel they are like the poor cousin, neglected lots. They're not the same as commercial. They don't have the resources that the commercial property owners have. They are also very unsupported because, there are regulations in place which are turning these buildings into mini utilities almost. They are having to put an STP plant, a water treatment plant and whatnot. And yet there is, and because there's no commercial return, it's just a cost item for them. It's also not looked at in a commercially viable way. So I guess what would be really useful in this forum of people with, people looking into innovation and future-proofing is to, we should, I think, collectively, whatever we are learning from the commercial properties, try and see how could we, turn it into some kind of a business model which allows, because there's a business opportunity also there, as in there's distributed STPs across so many facilities, and these residents are not having the competency. They may have a property manager or some facility manager or engineer employed. They have no way of even checking if the performances are being delivered. So it's really something, and also I feel in a forum like this, it would have been, at some point we would also should be involving the government stakeholders, because ultimately these assets that have been built into the residential complexes and are contributing to the city's centralized system not having to supply to them. And yet, because they are unsupported, because they have no capacity built into them, they are very unsustainably managed. And it can be a disaster for the city, because if the STPs fail, if the water supply systems, they're completely off-grid in an unsustainable way, it could be a panic situation when right now I'm working with buildings who are completely dependent on water trucks, and there's no question, the quality is questionable. They are having to depend on a borewell which has contaminated water, the borewell that has been built by the builder, but now it's run dry. So it's not a very happy situation there. So, as a community of automation practitioners, I would be very keen to hear what could be possible in a cost-effective way, in a way that's sustainable to support this community. And it's a growing city. If the city residents are not happy, the businesses also won't be happy.
Thank you, Bhakti. I think one thing, just to summarize on some of that there about open. Open means many things to many people, but we have open protocols. There will always be numerous protocols. There will be wireless. There's Thread from Google. There's LoRa. There's many wireless protocols as well as power over Ethernet. There will never be one protocol that's the answer to everything, but they should be open so that you can gain access to the information. And it's important to think about where you want to share that protocol with. Does it need to be done on site? Can it be done in the cloud? I think also open means that your Your product should be open for people to develop on, so it means they can tailor it to their needs, and also open commercially, so that I can choose my suppliers. And finally, I think it's something you brought up, is open between those people who actually have access to the data, sharing the information so that I can benchmark. And if I have a chain of retail stores, why wouldn't it be good to know that if I've got a certain square meters, how much it really should cost to do that, or what the lighting costs? So all those things are where you start having a community, and you have an open community that shares information, which is what I think people are beginning to demand.